Andrey Kortunov is Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council and joins us now from Moscow. Great to have you with us. We've just been seeing these exit polls, and it seems like President Putin will be re-elected. So far, he has over 70% of the vote. Less than 60% turnout. Is that a convincing mandate?
Well, I think that the Kremlin has accomplished what it wanted to accomplish. They wanted to get close to 60% of the turnout, and they're getting close to this figure. And they wanted to get 70% of public support. However, of course, the devil is in details, and we still have to find out how this support goes along with geography. For example, how many people did really support President Putin in Moscow and St. Petersburg? It is important.
Of course, one headline I saw today said Russia is pretending to have a presidential election because you've got a president going for re-election virtually unopposed. What do you put this down to? Is this genuine popularity? Is this propaganda? Or is it his ability to silence his opponents?
Well, I think that for a large part of the Russian population, stability is still perceived as a very important accomplishment. They still remember 1990s. They remember chaos and instability in the country. And they are grateful to President Putin for bringing stability back to Russia. At the same time, I think that the government, whatever can be said about the Russian government, turned out to be quite qualified and professional to manage the immediate repercussions of the crisis. And ordinary people do not really see a very deep decline in living standards, which makes them support President Putin this time.
So you mentioned the economy there, how he has turned the economy around. Is that the main reason for his popularity? Why do people in Russia like President Putin so much?
Well, I think that he does reflect some features of the Russian psyche. He is someone who can convey his message to ordinary people. It's not just about economy. It's about self-esteem, about national dignity. Putin is associated with major foreign policy victories, at least with something which is perceived as major foreign policy victories. And I think that he has a feeling of the Russian people which some of his opponents do not have.
A win today obviously means that we will have a Putin-led Russia until 2024, after which, under the Constitution, he is required to step down. We already know that he's extended presidential terms from 4 years to 6 years. Can you see a way that President Putin will do something to stay in power beyond 2024?
Well, of course, it's too early to guess about that, and we don't know what Russia might look like 6 years down the road. We don't know public moods and sentiments in 6 years. But my personal take is that he would prefer to have authority without having a formal power, that he would prefer to be a Russian Deng Xiaoping, a person who can still have a lot of influence without necessarily keeping the top position in the country.
We often hear that state TV there don't really show opposition protests, don't really broadcast the opposition protests in the country. Obviously, Alexei Navalny is the main opponent who was not allowed to run in this election. Had he been able to run, what sort of chance would he have had against President Putin?
Well, I'm not sure that Alexei Navalny would win because Vladimir Putin is still arguably the most popular politician in the country. But definitely, if he had run, if he had been allowed to run, we would have a very different election campaign this time. And it would have a lot of input on the political life in the country. By the way, you know, I think that it's not over. The end of election does not mean the end of political life in Russia. And I think that it was still an important learning experience for many people, including the people in the opposition. And we will definitely hear a lot about Navalny in months to come.
Andrey Kortunov, great to get your your perspective there from Russia. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, still to come, a big challenge for Russia's president as the country is accused of poisoning one of its former spies. We'll tell you what else the Kremlin is accused of when we come back. And Sunday's election in Russia was held on the 4th anniversary of Crimea's annexation. We're live from Moscow with more on the re-emergence of Russia on the world stage. Stay with us.
I simply wanted to come and cast my vote, support the person who has been with us for already many years. I won't make a secret out of it. We are not ready for changes. That's why we simply came and fulfilled our duty.
I voted for a strong candidate, for the reliable and trusted one.
I think that it is important that these democratic transformations continue and that we become a modern and open society and become a stronger economy in the world.